Hello everyone, this is Weather. In this video, we're going to be talking about an upcoming Arctic blast, some heavy snowfall, a tropical update as I give you an overall look at the first 2 weeks of October. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. This is September 30th. And I've really broadened the view this morning to kind of give you an overall snapshot of the next 2 weeks. So here is Africa, and this is the Atlantic Basin, and out here is the Pacific, and over here is the West Pacific. So let's start off here. We've got Sam, that's been a major hurricane for literally 5 days now. And if it stays a major hurricane until Sunday, it'll actually be the 5th longest major hurricane ever on record. And Ivan actually stayed a major hurricane for 10 days. So fortunately, Sam is not going to be any threat to any landmass as it continues to move out to sea. But it is the most intense it's been since its lifeline, 937 millibars and 145 mile per hour category 4 winds. So it's definitely packing a punch. We've got Victor out here that formed. It's going to be running into a lot of Saharan dust out here. It could develop into a minimal hurricane, but quickly start to dissipate into a tropical storm and fizzle. We have yet another tropical waves that you can see here off the Africa. That's going to make a beeline off the African coast, but it makes it very difficult for storms to continue making the traverse all the way up into the Caribbean this time of year. Out here, we've got 90L. Now, this is a very minimal invest, and this is expected to continue westward. If it stays weak like it has been, it has some sort of, chance to actually make some sort of, tropical type entity as it makes it into the Caribbean. And yes, by the second week of October, I'm definitely expecting a much more favorable setup for the Caribbean at that time frame. But we also have the Pacific. Hasn't been very active in the Pacific, but we also have this typhoon, this super typhoon Mandul out here by Japan. Now, what's going to happen with Mandul? This is actually going to recurve and lift up into towards Alaska in about a week time span. That's going to trigger some cold air that's going to be able to unlock from Alaska and dump over the western part of the U.S. and bring the coldest temperatures of the season and some heavy snowfall in its path. So let me kind of walk you through the teleconnections and what we're looking at. Let's take a look at the Arctic Oscillation, which is the AO. You can definitely see it goes negative and actually remains negative to neutral the first half of October. But also the PNA, this is your Pacific North American. You can definitely see here by October 1st, it starts to go negative. We're starting to see some of those cooler conditions enter off the West Coast currently, but that actually just kind of intensifies as we get deeper into October, and especially around that October 10th time frame, we're looking at about a -3 deviation, and that's going to bring some impressive cold shots into the western part of the U.S. and bring some heavy snowfall in its path. So let's take a look at the overall 500 millibar pattern currently right now for September 30th. We've got that developing trough off the West Coast here. That's bringing the inclement weather off the West Coast, and that other upper level low out here in the desert Southwest, bringing all the rain currently into New Mexico and Texas. That'll spread into Oklahoma. There's Sam, and there's a trough out here in the eastern seaboard, and then we've got that southeast ridge, the ridge over southeast Canada, locked and loaded. That's going to continue to remain in place for the foreseeable future. So as we walk you through that October 5th time frame, the pattern kind of resets and reloads. It modifies a little bit out west, but it's got that second push of surge of colder air. It's going to be entering the West Coast by the time we get into the middle of next week. And by the time we get into next weekend, the 10th time frame, when the PNA goes really negative, we're going to be seeing that trough entering the western U.S., with some very cold anomalies entering the picture as we've got that ridge locked over southeast Canada. By then, the Caribbean is going to get a lot more active, and we could have a lot of tropical moisture to be dealing with for parts of the southeast and up the eastern seaboard by then. But yeah, by the time we get in that 12th time frame of October the 12th, we've got all that cold air penetrating off the west coast, bringing those very cold anomalies for that region and some snow in its path, as we're dealing with some tropical moisture down here in the southeastern regions with that ridge over the top that's going to amplify the convergence underneath. And we could be looking at some very heavy rainfall up and along the southeast coast and up along the eastern seaboard, especially as we get in that second week of October. So let's walk you through today, because today we've got that upper level low pressure system for that September 30th time frame out here, just kind of sitting and spinning. It's taking its sweet time moving off into the east here. It's got some heavier rain that could be associated with it off into west Texas here, and even some severe weather we're going to have to be contending with later on this afternoon in far west Texas, with some heavier some hail, some bigger size hail. But to the north, it's still got some cold air on the backside, and it's going to be snowing in parts of the higher elevations later on this afternoon, and places just west of Denver there. And as we take you through that Friday time frame, there's that cold front will continue just to shift a little bit off further to the east. Now those heavier rains will spread into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, spread further into Austin, San Antonio areas, as it kind of elongates further off to the north and spread those heavier rains up into Kansas and Missouri, and up along right along this boundary here. That's where you're going to be seeing some of the heavier rains as you go into Friday. There's your setup for Saturday. It starts to modify a little bit as far as the heavier rain goes, and it starts to come to an end as we get into the afternoon, into the evening hours, say, for example, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But you've got those rain showers to contend with in the morning time frame, and it probably ends sometime in the afternoon. But yeah, into Arkansas, western Tennessee, getting into Kentucky here, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, you're going to be contending with those scattered showers and thunderstorms out ahead of this cold front as it continues to slowly push off to the east. So with that ridge locked over the top, by the time we get into that October 6th time frame, it's going to start causing convergence underneath, and we're going to have to be starting to look at the Caribbean again for something tropical that might start to develop in this region. Either the remnants of 90L coming across, or we've got new, more in close development. But the pattern shows that we've got a lot of upward rising motion air to start the second week of October, and things could get bumpy again for the Caribbean. Because if you look at the latest update on the JMA, which is the Japanese model, it updates every Thursday. And yeah, look at that. By week 2, we've been talking about this. It's got a lot of blue. That's a lot of upward rising motion air. It's going to be very conducive to produce tropical storm development in that region, if not some heavier rains. And that will spread up along the southeast and up along the east coast, because we got a lot of blue showing up. So it's going to be very easy for the air to rise in that type of atmosphere. And that's where we're going to have to be continuing with, especially with that ridge over the top. That's going to cause the lowering pressures underneath, and that's going to set the stage for heavier rains, if not some sort of tropical development coming out of that region. So let's take a look at the overall anomalies for today. So for September 30th, yeah, we're still dealing with some of that cooler air and some of that heavier snowfall that's dropping in the higher elevations. But yeah, even today in the Four Corners regions, where that low pressure system, that's where the lower temperatures are gonna be, as the ridge locks firmly over the top with those higher above average anomalies well to the north. So as we get into that Sunday time frame, that's when the temperatures start to modify a little bit, waiting for that second push with the Mundole making its way up to the Alaskan coastline. That's going to trigger and set the stage and bring down some of the coldest air of the season. And with the P&A going negative, that implies it's going to be off the west coast. And that's going to come to fruition as we get into the middle of next week. But by the time we get in that October 6th time frame, yes, we're going to have to be watching the Caribbean as this ridge starts to really amplify over the top. The cooler conditions start to filter back in off the west coast with those below average anomalies, and that will just intensify as we get into next Friday time frame, October the 8th, with those even colder conditions. California, Nevada, into Oregon, into Washington, into Idaho, all those places. In Utah, we'll start seeing those colder anomalies by then as the ridge just continues to be locked and loaded over the top. And that's just going to amplify what's underneath in the Caribbean and really start to get its act together and spreading some heavier rains back again. You're dry right now in the southeast into Florida, but that's going to change in a big way as we set the stage for next week with those heavier rains moving back into the picture. So as we get into that Sunday, October 10th time frame, when that P&A is well negative, if not a -3 deviation, that's when you're going to start seeing those well below average anomalies and the coldest temperatures of the season into California and in Nevada and Idaho and Oregon. And it's going to be cold enough for some snow, if not heavier snow, to fall at times in these regions, especially in the higher elevations, as the ridge will continue to be set over the top. Look at the lower anomalies underneath. That's where the rain is going to fall. And I'm getting concerned about maybe a severe, major flood threat, maybe potentially setting up over the Appalachians and the Carolinas, you know, as we get in about a 10 days time frame with this setup that I'm kind of looking at. So that's something I'm definitely even looking at this far out, that we could be looking at potential with this potential setup. So as we get into that October 11th time frame, that's when the temperatures really start to amplify and go dip further. We're probably talking some heavier snow by then, as the ridge is, I mean, you can see the difference. I mean, you're talking 20, 30 degrees below average to the west, 20 to 30 degrees at times above average to the east. So it's going to be a big swing in temperatures, and that's what you typically see in October. You know, one side of the frame is going to be just completely the opposite from one side of the country to the next, dealing with all that colder air and the well below average anomalies and snowfall out west, and then well above average air and hotter temperatures, warmer temperatures, and you're like, hey, where's fall? Where's winter? This is deep in the heart of summer. And that's what it's going to feel like for much of the northern states as we get into that second week of October. So let's take a look at the temperatures, because yeah, I mean, by the time we get in that October the 11th time frame, we're going to be looking at the coldest temperatures of the season. We had some freezing temperatures yesterday morning, but man, this really starts to sink south and even spread into Arizona, getting into Colorado, even parts of New Mexico. Widespread 30s. Look at all the reds showing up, 20s, even some teens starting to show up in the Canada and up here in the Sierra Mountains. So that's definitely signs of colder air definitely on the way, and the coldest temperatures that you're going to be experiencing so far this season. But yeah, underneath that, we've got snow to contend with that developing trough pulling down that colder air, and that just amplifies. We've got a lot of moisture in place, and we could be looking at some heavier snow starting to fall into parts of Canada here, into Montana, into Idaho, getting into northern parts of Nevada, northern, eastern parts of Oregon here, as the snow will just intensify, and it could really start to intensify as we get into that 11th time frame, as that coldest temperatures of the season will start entering back into the picture, and then that heavier snows and even some out here in Montana. But you can definitely see for the first 2 weeks of October, here's the snow. So yes, we could be looking at some pretty big snow events for Montana into Idaho, getting into parts of Wyoming. It'll lesser as we get towards Colorado, as a lot of the colder air will be bottled up to the north. But that is just a sign of things to come for much of the West Coast as we enter October. So let's take a look at the precipitation. So here's the overall look for the next 2 weeks, and this is definitely a welcome sight with that colder air. yes, we are going to be showing hints of precipitation in California. So we got some rain on the way for you guys in California, into the deserts of Arizona, into Nevada. Some heavier rains off the Pacific Northwest, where that continues. Where a lot of this is going to form in the form of snow as we get into deeper next week. But I'm definitely concerned down to the south and southeast. Like I mentioned, you're dry right now. So basically, you're kind of drying out right now for the next couple of days. But as we get into the middle of next week and that second week of October, we could be looking at some very heavy rain starting to set up as pressures over the top, convergence underneath. And that's definitely concerning to me up along the southeast coast, along the east coast, of some more heavier rains moving in the first 2 weeks of October. There's the setup on the European model, kind of implying the same thing. These are the overall precipitation anomalies for the next 2 weeks. Again, you're dry right now in the southeast, but that's going to change in a big way for Florida, up along the Georgia, up along the Carolina coast, Virginia, up all on the eastern seaboard. I'm definitely expecting some more heavier rains moving back the picture for the first 2 weeks of October, and the rains just continue for the Pacific Northwest, and then sporadic amounts for much of the south and to the middle part of the country. So I appreciate you guys watching. I know there's a lot to go over this morning. I kind of wanted to give you an overall snapshot of why I think it's going to happen for over the next 2 weeks. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Do give it a like to help send YouTube that you value my content so they can share it with others. Please leave your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.